different ways of seeing one's own dead body. We are definitely going to be dead, so we might as well accept it now and not wait until it happens. We might even now shake with fear every time the heart misses a beat, or we don't feel quite as well as we used to when we were 17. One of the ways of meditation on death is seeing oneself as a skeleton. Look at it sitting there in the meditative posture. Next, take the skeleton apart and lay the bones out one by one. Then let the bones crumble to dust. It takes away some of the ego illusion and the attachment to this body. One of our impediments is desire for physical comfort. It doesn't allow us to stay up at night because we could be too tired. It asks us to protect ourselves from mosquitoes and flies, from cold or hot weather, from any potential discomfort. We are busy protecting ourselves and spend much precious time on that.
It's one thing to know that we're going to die, but it's another thing to actually see one's death with one's inner vision and accept it with equanimity. Try it in your next meditation session for a few minutes. See yourself dead and watch the reaction. The first reaction may be, I can't do it and I don't want to do it. Try again. The foundation of mindfulness discourse is so well known because it provides the way to the deathless state, which is liberation. Most people come to a meditation course because they want to get some peace and quiet. They want to get away from it all and find some bliss, joy, and happiness that they can't find at home. Fine. But that's only one aspect of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha called this a pleasant abiding, and it relies on favorable conditions. Some people have already experienced the fact that their body is making it impossible for them to meditate. Some of them are lying down and some of them have even gone home, because the mind is reacting to discomfort. We are all prone to this danger. Let's know the danger before it happens and do something about it by seeing the body as it actually is.
Feeling. The next of the 5 attributes that we consist of is feeling. It plays another very important part in our ego illusion, because we believe feelings to be ours. I'm feeling well or unwell, or I'm feeling happy or unhappy. Yet, if they are ours, why don't we have jurisdiction over them? Why can't we constantly feel well, constantly feel happy, alert, at ease? Why not? Who is in charge of all of this? The ego illusion arises because we believe body and feeling to be ours. Yet when we examine them, we must come to the conclusion that we really have no say in the matter. It's all just happening. How do we come to think it's me? When there's any feeling of discomfort, sadness, boredom, or frustration, we become uncomfortable, sad, bored, frustrated. We react by being involved with the feeling instead of knowing that this feeling has arisen and will pass away, as all feelings do.
The moment we take our attention off the sadness and frustration, the boredom or intolerance, they're gone. But instead we believe our feelings stay with us and act accordingly. When the feeling of anger arises, people become angry instead of saying, "Ah yes. It's a feeling of anger. It will pass. I'll take my attention off it." Nothing creates ego except the belief that I am the body. I am the feeling.
Perceptions. Next we consist of perceptions, which tell us what things are. When the eye sees something, all it can distinguish is shape and color. The eye can only see that this is square and white in front and black at the back. But because you've seen such a thing many times before, you know this is a clock. The mind says, clock, and then the mind might continue, I wonder if it's local. She probably brought it with her from Australia. I wonder what it would cost over there. That's the mind talking. But if a 3-year-old comes in here and sees this, he may try playing ball with it. He doesn't know it's a clock. He might think it's a ball because he's familiar with balls, or he might think it's a building block and try to make a house with it. That's what he's familiar with. That's his perception of it.
The eye sees only shape and color, but perception has the conditioning of memory. Somebody who hasn't got a clock might think, I want one like that too. Or somebody who has a better one might think, mine is much more valuable. Ego is arising immediately, asserting its desires or superiority feelings. In reality, all we have seen is a square little box, black at the back and white at the front. Because of ego delusion and conditioning, perception creates a thinking process that we, of course, believe. There's no reason to disbelieve it because we've never analyzed it. By believing it, we are perpetuating the ego illusion. We are constantly thinking because we have to support our ego illusion. The ego is so fragile that it will fall apart unless it's supported. We keep adhering to the demands of the body and we become the feeling to support our ego illusion. If we were only to look at the feeling and say, it's just a feeling, then there would be no ego affirmation. Ego needs constant support because it isn't real. We don't have to keep saying, this is a house. This is a big house. This is an old house. It's obvious. This house exists. But the ego doesn't, and therefore it needs constant confirmation. This support comes from our thinking process, and gets additional help from being appreciated and loved, and through sense contacts and our perception of them.
Mental formations. We further consist of mental formations. They are also called the comma formations. They are the comma makers. The moment the thought process starts, we're making comma. If somebody sees this clock and says, it's a clock. I don't have one. I'd like one too, comma has been made, the comma of greed. Or someone says, this is a nice clock. Mine isn't as nice. That's comma of envy. Immediately when the thought process starts, some comma is being made. Some of it is neutral. There's no impact from it. When one just says, that's a clock, that's neutral. But most of the time we make either good or bad comma. If we see a color and we say, I'm going to paint my house that color, that's neutral. But behind it may already be the intention of having a nicer house than the neighbor. That's unskillful comma.
When we believe all that's going on in the mind, we have our cherished ego support. That's why it's so difficult to stop thinking in meditation. Because the ego support will be lost. Even if the thinking stops for a moment and there is calm and quiet, the thoughts will immediately come back and say, "Ooh, what was that? That was nice." That's the end of that meditation and one has to start all over again. There is constant comma being made with our thought processes. They are judging, deciding, grasping, or rejecting. Only the mindfulness of moment-to-moment awareness can make a correct analysis. Then we can see what we're doing and no longer need to believe all that the mind tells us. In meditative practice one notices clearly that most of the mind stuff is pretty unbelievable. It's either old and gone or it hasn't even happened yet. Or it's plain fantasy. Most of the thoughts that flit through the mind have no real connection with anything. The mind usually grasps at some trigger and uses it to play its own games.
Sense consciousness. The fifth attribute that we consist of is sense consciousness. This means the contact we make with our senses. The I, the object, and I consciousness come together, and what results? Sight. The ear, the sound, and ear consciousness together produce hearing, etc. We are constantly using our senses. At this moment, you are using your eyes, your ears, your touch, and your mind consciousness. The eyes see what goes on around you, the ears hear what I'm saying, and the touch notices the sitting posture. The mind tries to grasp the meaning of what is heard. We try to create situations in which the senses contact what pleases us. But the endeavor is hopeless. It isn't possible to obtain only pleasant contacts. Constant attacks are being made on us through the senses. This is the way of living beings and very noticeable in the human realm.
When there is a very loud noise, people become frightened. Some noises are pleasing to us, and yet if we were to continue them without end, they would become unbearable. We can't simply continue to play Beethoven for the rest of our lives. The senses are not exactly what we think they are. In fact, most people take them for granted. They don't even think about them. All they want are the pleasurable sensations. Pleasure is certainly available through the senses, but very few people ever think that the senses are actually a misery to us. They are constantly pushing us in all directions trying to find pleasure.
The Buddha gave a simile about the body, its incessant demands and resulting misery. A father and mother are traveling through the desert with their small child. They run out of provisions but continue their journey until they become so weak and hungry that they can't go on. In the end, they slay the child and eat it. Our mental formations are compared to a prisoner who is being dragged by two fellows into a flaming pit. Our thought processes, whether good or bad, drag us into the flames of rebirth. The Buddha tried to show, with these similes, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of all that constitutes a human being, so that we could make real effort to get out of the wheel of birth and death. We have to understand that there is no individual who owns body, feeling, perception, thought, and consciousness. That is the most difficult aspect of the Buddhist teaching. Difficult to conceptualize and even more difficult to experience. Without meditation, it will remain an intellectual exercise.
5 khandhas, 5 aggregates, 5 attributes is all we are. Then the question arises, if that's all we are, what are we trying so hard for? Yes, that's all we are, but that's not what we think we are. We've got to work with what we know, and we don't know that that's all we are. We know something entirely different about ourselves. We know this is me with body and feeling, perception and thinking and sense consciousness. So we have to work with that and purify our emotions in order to come to the point where we do know that's all there is. When there isn't anybody there couldn't possibly be a problem. Problems only exist if there's somebody there to have them. There is the deed, but no doer. There is suffering, but no sufferer. There is the path, but no one to enter it. And there is liberation, but no one to attain it.